What would you do if the family you'd bled for called you a fraud to your face? Rain lashed the glass walls of the Carver and Sons headquarters, a sterile fortress looming over Boston's jagged skyline, as Lila Carver faced that brutal truth. At 24, she stood in the boardroom, chestnut hair taut, gray suit sharp, pitching a lifeline to an empire that despised her. The youngest, the only woman, she was a ghost among titans. Her father's cold eyes met hers. "You're not one of us." Her brothers smirked. Save them or burn them. Her choice would echo forever. Comment your pick. 1 for mercy, 2 for vengeance. And don't forget to like and subscribe to Graceful Revenge. If you love stories of resilience, reclaiming justice with style, and rediscovering your worth, hit that subscribe button for Graceful Revenge now. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a video. Let's dive into the power of elegant revenge and life's deepest lessons together. The air inside was thick with the scent of polished oak and the weight of unspoken disdain. Lila gripped the remote, her hands steady despite the tremor beneath her skin as she clicked through her slides with precision. Graphs glowed on the screen, market trends, buyer demographics, a 5-year projection promising a 35% growth spike. "The industry's shifting," she said, her voice cutting through the hum of the projector. "Young professionals, tech-savvy families, women-led households, they want sustainable luxury. We can own this niche before it's saturated." Her words hung heavy, a plea masked as strategy. She paused, scanning the room for a flicker of acknowledgement. Her father, James Carver, sat at the far end, his silver hair catching the dim light, his face a mask of indifference as he flipped through a stack of papers. Her older brothers, Ethan and Miles, lounged in their leather chairs, exchanging glances that screamed amusement. Her uncle, Tom, doodled on a legal pad, his pen scratching louder than her voice seemed to reach. The silence was suffocating. James didn't look up. "You done, Lila?" Her chest tightened, a familiar ache clawing at her ribs. "No, Dad. This isn't just a pitch. It's survival. Carver and Sons is stagnating. We're losing ground to competitors who see what's coming. If we don't adapt..." "Enough." His voice sliced through hers, cold and unyielding, a guillotine dropping on her hopes. He leaned back, folding his arms across his chest. "You're not one of us, Lila. This company was forged by men, built by men, run by men. You've got talent, I'll give you that. But this..." He waved a dismissive hand at the screen. "This isn't your lane. You don't have the instinct." The room froze. Lila's breath caught, her pulse hammering in her ears. "Excuse me?" she whispered, barely audible. He met her gaze for the first time, his eyes hard as granite. "You're too soft, too emotional. You care more about how people feel than how deals get done. That's not leadership, that's sentiment." Ethan, the eldest at 30, let out a low, mocking chuckle, his blue eyes glinting with malice. "What's next, Lila? Solar-powered yoga retreats? This isn't a charity." Miles, 28 and perpetually smug, leaned forward, his grin sharp. "Maybe stick to picking curtains, sis. Leave the real work to the big boys." Lila's nails dug into her palms, the pain grounding her as rage simmered beneath her skin. She'd poured everything into this, weeks of sleepless nights, calls to her MBA network, endless revisions to craft a vision that could drag their crumbling empire into the future. She'd memorized their financials better than their CFO, run entire regional projects at 23, earned the only advanced degree in the family, and they laughed. Her mother, Grace, wasn't there to defend her. She'd stopped attending meetings years ago, retreating into silence. Uncle Tom, who'd once pulled her aside to whisper, "You're the future, kid," stared at his doodles like a coward avoiding a fight. James stood, brushing invisible lint from his cuff with casual arrogance. "Your brothers aren't perfect, but they understand how to carry the Carver name. They've got grit. You? You're a dreamer playing dress-up at the grown-ups table." He paused, his gaze cutting deeper than his words. "You're not the smart one, Lila. You just work harder to fake it." The words landed like a fist to her gut, knocking the air from her lungs. A memory flashed. 8 years old, trailing James through a half-built mansion, her sneakers kicking up dust as she clutched a notebook full of sketches. "One day, Daddy," she'd asked, her voice small and hopeful, holding up a drawing of a house with solar panels and a rooftop garden. He'd ruffled her hair, his laugh warm but dismissive. "Maybe, kid, if you grow some grit." She'd spent 16 years chasing that maybe, proving herself in every internship, every late-night shift, every contract she'd dissected. And now, it was ash in her mouth. She forced a laugh, a sharp, brittle sound that made James narrow his eyes. "A dreamer, huh? Funny, I call it foresight." "Call it what you want," he said, turning away. "It's not power." He walked out, his footsteps echoing in the cavernous room. The others followed, Ethan's smirk lingering, Miles tossing her a pitying glance, Tom slinking away without a word. Alone, Lila stood frozen, staring at her reflection in the darkened projector screen. The rain streaked the windows like tears she refused to shed. She didn't cry. She burned. If they wouldn't give her a seat at their table, she'd build her own, and she'd make it so tall they'd choke trying to climb it. Lila's mind drifted to those endless summers on construction sites, the air thick with sawdust and the rumble of her father's voice barking orders. At 10, she'd memorized every beam, every angle, scribbling designs in a spiral notebook she hid under her pillow. One sticky July afternoon, she'd tugged his sleeve, her hands trembling as she held up a sketch, a house with solar panels, wildflowers spilling over the roof. "Look, Daddy, it's the future," she'd said, her voice bright with pride. He'd glanced down, his hazel eyes softening for a fleeting second before amusement took over. "Cute, Lila, but we build real homes, not fairy tales." Ethan, 12 and already towering over her, had snatched the paper from her hands, tearing it in half with a grin. "Stick to dolls, weirdo." Miles, 9 and eager to please, had giggled, kicking the scraps into the dirt. She'd run off, locking herself in a trailer bathroom, sobbing into her knees. But the next day, she was back, watching, learning, waiting for the chance they'd never give. Another memory surged. 16, shadowing James at a black tie gala, her dress too tight, her smile too forced. She'd overheard him bragging to a client by the bar. "My boys'll take this company to the stars. Lila, she's just along for the ride." The client had laughed, clapping James on the shoulder. She'd slipped away, hiding in a stairwell, her fists clenched as she swore she'd prove him wrong. Now, at 24, that girl screamed inside her. She'd done everything, earned an MBA, run projects, outworked them all. And still, she was the fairy tale girl, too soft for their world. That night, Lila didn't sleep. She paced her sleek Boston apartment, the city lights mocking her through the floor-to-ceiling windows. She packed a suitcase, black leather, scuffed from years of trailing her father's shadow, and left before dawn, the hum of her old Toyota drowning out the echoes of their laughter. She drove west, the highway stretching into a blur, until she hit Portland, Oregon, a city where the Carver name was just another sound in the wind. She rented a cramped apartment above a bakery, the air heavy with cinnamon and yeast, the walls chipped and yellowed. She opened her laptop, and a blank page stared back. No boardroom, no smirks, just her. She named her company Stellar Homes, a quiet nod to a star no one notices until it outshines the rest. It was a gamble, a middle finger to the legacy she'd abandoned. Her savings were thin, her contacts limited to a handful of classmates, and a stubborn will to prove them wrong. The first months were brutal. She pitched to anyone who'd listen: small contractors, eco-conscious homeowners, boutique developers. Her voice raw, her diet reduced to instant noodles and black coffee. A woman running a design firm? Cute, they'd say, doors slamming in her face. But a few said yes. Her first project was a custom smart home renovation for a tech exec, a sleek, sustainable mansion with a 6-week deadline. She drafted every blueprint by hand, sourced every solar panel, micromanaged every subcontractor. She slept 4 hours a night, her hands stained with ink and sawdust, her eyes bloodshot but alive. Failure wasn't an option. She didn't just want to succeed. She wanted to bury Carver and Sons under the weight of her triumph. Within a year, Stellar Homes had a pulse. 5 employees crammed into a rented studio with peeling paint, a whisper of a reputation buzzing in Portland's underbelly. She kept it quiet, her eyes fixed on Carver and Sons from afar. Their glossy ads still clogged magazines, their trucks still rolled through high-end sites, but she saw the cracks: stagnant designs, ignored trends, a name coasting on fumes. They were blind, and she was a ghost in their rearview. Lila's plan wasn't just about building a company. It was about dismantling an empire. She studied Carver and Sons like a predator stalking prey. Every contract they bid on, every project they botched, every client they took for granted. They ignored eco-trends, scoffed at younger buyers, leaned on a legacy rusting at the edges. She'd exploit every weakness, turn their arrogance into her weapon. Step 1, poach their talent. She started with Sarah, a designer Ethan had fired for overreaching after she'd dared to pitch a green initiative. Sarah's eyes blazed with fury when Lila tracked her down at a dingy coffee shop. "They'll regret it," she'd said, signing on without hesitation. Next came Mark, a project manager Miles had sidelined for questioning a shady bid. "I know their dirty tricks," he told Lila over beers, his voice low. "I'm in." One by one, she built a team of cast-offs, people like her, overlooked and underestimated, their resentment a fire she stoked with every late-night meeting. Step 2, undercut their bids. She tracked Carver and Sons projects through industry whispers and old contacts, bidding lower with sharper, more innovative ideas. Sustainable luxury they couldn't dream of matching. She lost money at first, burning through her savings to build a name, but every lost dollar was an investment in their downfall. Step 3, silence. No press releases, no boasts, no trace. She wanted them to think she'd vanished, a broken girl licking her wounds, while she sharpened her blade in the dark. She rented a second office, a bare-bones warehouse on Portland's outskirts, to hide her growing operation. She hired a marketing genius, Claire, who'd once worked for a rival firm Carver and Sons had crushed. "They're dinosaurs," Claire said, crafting a brand that whispered to the clients James ignored. Young professionals, women, tech-forward families. Stellar Homes became a shadow competitor, stealing contracts without a sound. A flashback hit her one night, hunched over blueprints in the warehouse, the air cold and stale. She was 14, sitting in James's office after school, listening as he berated a junior designer for a late delivery. "Weakness loses us money," he'd snapped. then turned to her with a rare smile. "Learn that, Lila. Feelings don't build empires." She'd nodded, desperate for his approval, but inside, she'd wondered, what if feelings fuel something stronger? Now, that question was her answer. Her rage, her pain, her stubborn hope. They were the foundation of Stellar Homes, and she'd use them to topple his world. 18 months in, Lila faced her first real test. A Portland developer dangled a $10 million condo project, 20 units, high-end, eco-focused. Carver and Sons was the frontrunner. Ethan had been schmoozing the client for months. Lila's proposal was better: sleeker designs, lower costs, a solar grid that would sell itself. But a former intern slipped her a bombshell over drinks. Ethan had bribed a city official to lock in the deal, $50,000 under the table. The proof was in an email, forwarded to her burner phone. She could leak it to the press, watch Carver and Sons burn in a scandal, and take the contract without breaking a sweat. Or she could stay clean, submit her bid, and risk losing to their corruption. She paced her warehouse office, the rain drumming on the tin roof, her mind a battlefield. "Expose them!" the voice in her head screamed. "They've lied, cheated, crushed you for years. Let the world see their rot." She imagined the headlines: Carver and Sons caught in bribery scheme. James's face pale on the evening news. Ethan scrambling to explain. It would ruin them faster than she'd dreamed. A swift, brutal end to their reign. But another voice crept in, softer, insistent. "Is this who you are? A Carver with a sharper knife? If you sink to their level, what's the difference?" She could forgive, not for them, but for herself. Let their collapse come naturally. Or she could walk away, build stellar homes without their blood on her hands, prove her worth without stooping. The clock ticked past midnight. She grabbed her phone, typed the leak to a local journalist, her finger hovering over send. Her breath hitched. This could end them, right now. But the girl who'd cried over torn sketches whispered, "You're better than this." She deleted the message, her hands shaking, and submitted her bid instead. "I'll beat them my way," she muttered, the words of vow. Days later, the developer called. Her proposal had won, fair and square. Ethan's bribe hadn't been enough to outweigh her vision. But as she hung up, the question lingered. Had she spared them for her soul, or because some part of her still loved them? The condo deal was her spark, igniting a chain of victories. Over the next 6 months, Stellar Homes snatched 3 more contracts from Carver and Sons, each a dagger in their bloated pride. A $15 million office retrofit in Seattle, a luxury townhouse cluster in Boise, a boutique hotel in Bend, all slipped through James's fingers into hers. She hired Paul, a grizzled project lead James had axed after 20 years for lacking vision. Paul shook her hand with a grin. "They're rotting inside, Lila. You're the reckoning they never saw coming." Then came the main resort, a $50 million lifeline Carver and Sons had banked on to shore up their sinking finances. Lila got wind of it through Sarah, who'd overheard Ethan bragging at a trade show. She spent 3 weeks crafting her pitch: lower overhead, greener tech, a timeline that shaved 2 months off their bloated schedule. She walked into the client meeting in a black blazer, no makeup, her voice steel. "We're not just building a resort," she said, sliding her proposal across the table. "We're building the future." The client ditched Carver and Sons mid-handshake, signing with her that afternoon. James's furious voicemail hit her inbox hours later. "Who the hell do you think you are?" She didn't reply. She deleted it and poured herself a coffee. Layoffs followed in Boston. Junior designers first, then the receptionist who'd greeted Lila as a kid, then veterans who'd bled Carver blue. Paul emailed her a week later, desperate. "They're imploding. Got a spot for me?" She didn't hesitate. "Welcome to Stellar," she wrote, her fingers trembling with something close to triumph. The real blow landed 6 months later, a government contract to retrofit eco-friendly buildings, $100 million over 5 years. Carver and Sons had assumed it was theirs, submitting a lazy bid propped up by their name. Lila fought for it tooth and nail, her proposal a masterpiece of precision. Solar grids, recycled materials, a budget that danced on a razor's edge. When the press release dropped, blaming market volatility and rising competition, she leaned back in her chair, staring at Portland's skyline through the warehouse windows. They didn't know it was her. Not yet. Another flashback struck. 20, interning at Carver and Sons, overhearing Ethan mock her to a client in the break room. "Lila's just Daddy's pet project. She'll never run shit." She'd locked herself in a bathroom stall, sobbing into her sleeves, vowing to prove him wrong. Now she raised a glass to that girl. "You didn't just run it," she whispered. "You rewrote it." The cracks widened, and Lila's resolve wavered. A former Carver assistant, Jen, called her late one night, voice shaking. "They're cutting everyone, Lila. My kids got medical bills. I can't lose this. You're killing us." Jen had been kind to her once, slipping her coffee during late shifts, whispering encouragement when James wasn't looking. Now her plea twisted a knife in Lila's gut. This isn't just about them, she thought. It's about the people caught in their mess. She could slow down, let Carver and Sons breathe, spare the innocent. Or she could press harder, finish them off, and build stellar homes on their ruins. She stood at her apartment window, the city a blur of lights. "Forgive them," her heart urged. "Jen doesn't deserve this. Neither do the others." But her mind snapped back. "They didn't spare you. Why should you save them?" She could expose their mismanagement, leaks of padded budgets, ignored safety codes, or walk away, let their collapse bury the guilty and innocent alike. She tossed all night, Jen's voice echoing. By dawn, she decided, no mercy, but no cruelty. She'd keep poaching their talent, give the Jens of the world a lifeline, but Carver and Sons would fall. "It's not my fault they built a house of cards," she told herself, the words hollow. The truth erupted on a stormy Tuesday morning, rain-soaked and electric. Lila was reviewing plans in her warehouse office when Mia, her assistant, burst in, eyes wide. "Lila, you're trending!" She thrust a tablet into Lila's hands, the headline screaming, "Lila Carver, youngest female CEO in U.S., revealed as ghost behind stellar homes." Forbes broke the story, but it spread like wildfire. CNN, Bloomberg, morning talk shows. Photos of her at a tech conference, clips of her keynote, a brutal side-by-side of Carver and Sons' losses and Stellar's wins. The media painted her as a phoenix, the exiled daughter who'd torched her family's empire and risen from the ashes. Her phone exploded. Journalists, investors, old classmates clamoring for a piece of her. Then a text from Grace. "Your father saw it. He's locked himself in his study. Hasn't spoken." Lila stared at the screen, her coffee going cold. She'd craved this moment, his silence, their shock. But a pang hit her. Did I want him broken or just seen? A producer called that afternoon. Primetime interview, national coverage. "You in?" her publicist asked. Lila hesitated. She'd built stellar homes for freedom, not fame. But maybe it was time to step into the light. "Yeah," she said, "let's do it." The interview aired 3 days later. She wore a charcoal suit, understated but lethal. Her hazel eyes locked on the host. "Is it true you're James Carver's daughter?" the woman asked, leaning in. Lila didn't flinch. "Yes. Why hide it?" "You built Stellar Homes, a company that's outpaced Carver and Sons, after they pushed you out. Was it revenge?" She paused, her mind a storm. "Expose them, every lie, every cut they gave me. Forgive, let it die quietly, or walk away, let the world judge." "No," she said finally, her voice steady. "It's about building something real, something mine, and giving others a place where they're not just shadows." The audience roared as she left the stage. Stellar's website crashed from the traffic. Their stock soared 18% overnight. Investors circled, whispering about Europe, Asia, a global leap. But in the Carver family group chat, silence reigned, until Ethan broke it. "You used us." She didn't reply. They'd used her absence to pretend she'd never mattered. Now the world knew better. Days later, an email from James landed in her inbox. "Meet me. Alone. We need to talk." She drove to a diner outside Portland. Neutral ground, the air thick with grease and regret. He sat in a corner booth, haggard, a shadow of the titan she'd feared. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. "The company's done," he said, his voice raw. "Bankruptcy's filed. Ethan's a mess. Miles is checked out. Merge with Stellar. You lead. Save us." Her heart stuttered. Merge? Her empire swallowing theirs? She could expose their rot. Bribery, padded budgets, years of cutting corners, ruin them forever in one press conference. Or she could forgive, rebuild them under her flag, prove she was bigger than their pettiness. Or walk away, let them sink into the abyss they dug. They don't deserve mercy, she thought, her hands clenching around her coffee mug. They mocked me, broke me. Why should I pull them up? But a quieter voice whispered, "You're not them. Mercy isn't weakness, it's power. And what about Mom? The others?" "I was wrong," he said, his voice breaking, tears glinting in his eyes. "You're the sharp one. Always were. I should have seen it." The girl in her screamed, "Take it! Make him beg, then crush him." The woman she'd become hesitated. "You don't need his crown." "But what if this fixes something?" She stared at him, the man who'd shaped her through rejection. "No," she said finally, standing. "I built Stellar without you. Die without me." He slumped, a broken king. She walked out, the rain cold on her skin, her mind still wrestling. Did I just kill them or free myself? The reunion invite arrived a week later. Carver Family Annual Reunion, Saturday, 4 p.m., Carver Estate, pristine and mocking in its normalcy. Lila stared at the embossed card, the irony bitter on her tongue. 4 years ago, they'd laughed her out of their world. Now they wanted her back in their house. She went, not for them, but for closure. She pulled up the long driveway in a matte black Rolls-Royce Ghost, its growl slicing through the estate's silence. She stepped out in a tailored cream suit, her heels clicking on the gravel, her presence a quiet thunder that stopped conversations cold. The murmurs started as she crossed the threshold. Cousins froze mid-sentence, uncles gawked. Old family friends whispered behind their wine glasses. Grace approached, her face a mix of pride and grief, her hands trembling as she reached out. "You look incredible, Lila." "Thanks," Lila said, her voice low and cutting. "Let's skip the charade." Grace nodded, stepping back with a sad smile. Ethan and Miles stood by the fireplace, drinks in hand, their eyes darting from her car keys to her face, their confidence crumbling. She didn't stop for them. She strode through the house, past the staircase where she'd once hidden from their taunts, past the dining room where James had toasted her brother's futures, and out to the back patio. James stood alone, staring at the sprawling lawn, a king surveying the ruins of his kingdom. His shoulders sagged, his hair thinner, his frame smaller than she'd ever seen. He turned at the sound of her heels on the stone, and for the first time, he looked fragile. "You came," he rasped, his voice barely above a whisper. "I did." He studied her, searching for the girl he'd broken. "We're finished. The company's gone. Your brothers can't hold it together. We need you." She laughed, the sound cold and jagged. "Need me? After you said I'd never lead? After soft, emotional, not one of us? You called me a dreamer, Dad, a fake." "I was wrong," he said, his hands trembling. "I see it now. You're the best of us." "No, maybe this time?" She stepped closer, her voice rising. "I built Stellar while you laughed. I won while you rotted, and now you beg?" "Family," he started, his voice cracking. "Family!" She cut him off, her words a whip. "You erased me. I begged for a chance, and you threw me out. I don't save ghosts." He reached for her arm, desperate. "Please, Lila, merge with us. Take it all. Just don't let it die." Her mind raced. Forgive him. Fix this. Be the bigger person? Expose him? Tell the world every lie he's told? Or walk away, let him drown? She saw her mother's face, the employees like Jen, the legacy she could reclaim. But she also saw the girl in the dust, the torn sketches, the years of dismissal. "No," she said, pulling back. "You made your empire. I made mine. I'm not here to rescue you. I'm here to bury you." His face crumpled, tears spilling down his cheeks. "You're no daughter of mine." "Good," she shot back, her voice steady. "I stopped being yours the day I started being me." She turned, her heels echoing as she walked away. The crowd parted, whispers, stolen glances, a few forced smiles. She didn't look back, not at James, not at the house, not at the girl who'd begged to belong. She slid into the rolls, the engine roaring to life, and peeled out of the driveway. The estate shrank in the rearview mirror, a fading relic of a life she'd outgrown. Her mind settled. I walked away. Not for them. For me. Monday morning, the headlines roared across every screen. Carver and Sons files for bankruptcy as Stellar Homes announces global expansion. Lila Carver sat in her Portland office, a sleek loft with floor-to-ceiling windows, whiskey in hand, the city's lights sprawling below like a map of her victory. She wasn't the shadow anymore. She was the storm that had swept through their world. But as the amber liquid burned her throat, a quiet realization settled in her chest. Winning hadn't erased the girl who'd once craved their approval. It had freed her to stop needing it. She'd spent years chasing their validation, only to find her worth in the empire she'd built alone. A memory flickered. 12 years old, perched on the estate's porch, James teaching her to tie a knot as the sun dipped low. "Strong enough to hold, loose enough to let go," he'd said, his rare smile warming her. She'd let go now, not just of them, but of the weight of their judgment. In the end, true strength wasn't in holding on. It was in walking away. "Revenge doesn't heal," she murmured to the empty room, "but redemption does. What about you? Have you ever faced a moment where you had to choose between fighting for what's fair or letting go for your own peace? Take a second to reflect. Share your story in the comments. Did you hold on or did you release? If Lila's journey struck a chord, subscribe to Graceful Revenge. Share this with someone who needs it, and catch the next chapter of vengeance and victory. See you in the Graceful Revenge.